as a supervisor, were you aware of what the responsibilities were of the officer or the officers that were required to that were working the post?
As far as
what were you required to supervise them doing? What were they required to do?
make sure traffic was moving, pedestrian safety,
Okay. And what were they required to wear?
traffic vest, and the hat.
And describe the traffic vest.
It's blue, yellow, reflective, officer safety.
And is the purpose of that so they're visible?
Yes.
Just want to show you what's been marked as S5B in evidence.
B as in boy.
B as in boy. And that, what is S5B in evidence?
It's a pay voucher.
A pay voucher for who?
Michael Mayetti.
And according to S5B in evidence, the location that Mayetti's pay voucher indicates he was at, well, strike that. It's a pay voucher for Mayetti for what date?
For June 2nd, 2014.
Okay, and for what time? What time? What shift?
6 a.m. and 10 a.m.
And that was the shift that you just went through that you supervised?
Yes.
Okay. And the detailed project name according on Mayetti's pay voucher is Pulaski Skyway?
Yes.
And the location is Columbus and Marin Boulevard, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, according to your patrol sheet, who did you see at Columbus and Marin Boulevard?
Sergeant Majuri and P.O. Kane.
Okay, and according to your patrol sheet, did you see Officer Mayetti there?
5D?
Well, yeah, according to your patrol sheet, did you see him?
No.
And according to S5B, Mayetti's pay voucher, did you engage with Mayetti at Columbus and Marin Boulevard on June the 2nd, 2014?
No.
According to, well, strike that, that's not your signature there? Under the foreman authorized agent.
No.
And can you read that name there?
Captain J. Askeles.
You know Captain Joseph Askeles?
Yes, I do.
Okay, is he in the courtroom today?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And how well do you know Captain Askeles?
Good.
Doing well?
Yes.
And was he were you familiar with his role regarding the Skyway detail?
No.
All right, so you recall he had said you were compelled to be there, but he wanted to confirm with you that your statement was voluntary, correct?
Something like that.
Yeah, and is it fair to say you seemed a little confused at that concept that you were being ordered to be there, compelled to be there, but that your statement was voluntary? Remember that?
Yes.
So what, as you sit here today, what was your understanding of the nature of that interview in terms of it being voluntary?
I was answering to the aspects of what I did that day, my job.
Okay. And you recall at the bottom of page 24, Detective Signorelli had indicated to you that this interview and the questioning wasn't a reflection on you, because from what we can tell, your paperwork is spot on. It's done correctly. Remember him saying that to you?
I don't remember that, but I see it in writing.
Okay. And you answered okay to that in the interview, according to the transcript?
Okay, yes.
And then he said, that's part of the reason that this turns into an issue is because you did your paperwork correctly, and your answer was okay.
I'm going to object. The questions, this statement is an out-of-court statement. It's hearsay. If there are inconsistencies, then of course you could use this statement to impeach the credibility of this witness, but the statements made here are hearsay. If he has questions with respect to the voluntariness of it, it doesn't come from the out-of-court statement, Judge. There has to be questions posed to this officer, and if he answers inconsistently with the statement, then he could use the statement to impeach his credibility, but the statement itself does remain hearsay as it is an out-of-court statement by this witness. I understand that he testified. However, it still doesn't make the substance of this statement just generally admissible as if it, to have this witness read it. If it's inconsistent, then there's a process by which Mr. Garrigan or any defense counsel can use the statement to impeach his credibility, but it does remain a hearsay statement. And that's my objection with respect to this line of questioning.
Well, I just want to add this. It's Mr. Garrigan's witness, but it doesn't have to be for impeachment. It could be to refresh his recollection as to what was asked and answered in the interview.
Do you think he's anything to refresh one's recollection?
Yes, Judge, but he wasn't asked a question, do you remember, or anything like that, or don't you recall? He's simply reading from the transcript. That is my objection. You cannot read from the transcript.
The objection's over. We'll allow the question because it's clear to this court that this witness does not necessarily have a clear recollection of numerous things, but what helps him recall something are these statements and vouchers and patrol logs. Is that fair to say, officer?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll allow the questioning, and more importantly, this is cross-examination. So I'm going to give some leeway, of course, to cross of this witness as I do in all cases.
Thank you.
Cross-examination. All right, thank you.
So, Sergeant, my question to you is, when Detective Signorelli indicated to you that your paperwork was spot on, he said, from what we can tell, and you said, okay, do you know what paperwork he was referring to?
He had to be referring to the voucher and sheet that I submitted.
Okay, so for the June 2nd date, had he shown you any other paperwork? And I'll make the representation to you, they did show you some paperwork from a different date, June 4th. That's not relevant to this case any longer. But any other than June 2nd and June 4th, was there any other paperwork you were shown?
From what I recall, I remember the voucher and the other sheet. There was pay vouchers, but I don't recall as to what pay vouchers they were.
Okay. Did he have any discussion, if you can recall, whether it was during the interview itself or prior to the interview or even subsequent to it, where he indicated where he derived his belief that your paperwork was spot on?
I don't recall it. I see it in writing, I don't recall.
When you say you see it in writing, just for purposes of the record, you're talking about the transcript that's
Transcript that's in front of me, yes.
which is D.
All right, let me just ask you, we have about 5 minutes of questions on another topic, then we can continue. You were talking about, when questioned by the prosecutor, about your procedure when you filled out your patrol log.
Yes.
Recall that? And you said you would go to the location and you'd see the individuals at the location and you would check them in, is what you had said, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, in terms of the paperwork that you had with you, what documents did you have with you?
Document that partial list.
Okay. So what we
Printed
refer
out.
to as the master.
Master list, printed out.
Okay. And did you have that off-duty supervisor's activity sheet or the patrol log that that you've been referring to?
Yes.
Now, were you actually filling that out as you saw the individuals, or did you keep scrap paper that you would write on?
I would make notes and then fill it at the end.
Okay. So, is it fair to say then that you weren't contemporaneously filling out S5D, which is your patrol log, as you were going from post to post? Is that correct?
That's correct.
You had some sort of scratch paper or some notes that you were writing down, and then at some point in time after the tour, you would sit down with the patrol log, and from your scratch paper, you would fill out S5D,
yes.
correct? So what would you do with the notes after you filled out S5D?
The note that I recall, you mentioned notes. The thing that I recall is writing on that sheet that I printed out.
Okay. So that would be, what would you do with that document that you had your sheet, the master list? What would you do with that after you filled out your patrol?
Throw it out.
Okay. And I think you had said in your statement that you did that because your handwriting was terrible and you'd rewrite
to
it
make
later.
it legible, yes.
Okay. So this patrol log, in order for us to rely upon it, we'd have to understand that you wrote on some other document first as to information that you gleaned during that 4-hour tour, and then you put it onto your patrol log at some later point.
That's correct.
Now, if you transcribed information from your scratch paper or from that master that you wrote on to the patrol log, and you did it incorrectly, that doesn't mean that you falsified S5D, correct?
That's correct.
And you would agree, I think you had testified earlier, we'll get into it after lunch, that you had mistakes on your patrol log, correct?
We noticed one mistake.
Right. So it wasn't spot on, to be precise, correct?
There was one mistake.
Okay. And you have, just so we're clear, you have no independent recollection at all of June 2nd, that particular tour from 6 to 10. Okay. And as far as, you were asking some questions about Michael Maietti. You didn't know Michael Maietti then, correct?
I believe I did know him.
Okay. You indicated that when you were being questioned by Detective Signorelli, and you can take a look at your statement, I'll point it to the location, that you were trying to picture his face in your head and you couldn't, correct?
True.
All right. So you'd heard of him, but at the time that you were being interviewed, that was 2.5 years ago, you couldn't picture his face.
I couldn't picture his face, but I did know him.
Okay. And what did you know about him in terms of where he worked?
Motorcycle squad.
Okay. And did you know what my client, Lieutenant Kelly Chesler, and/or Captain Askeles had to do with the motorcycle squad, if anything, during that time period?
I don't recall.
January 2016, being asked on several occasions about there being 3 vouchers for officers for a 2-man post. Any questions about that?
No. You want me to reflect?
Okay, well, you testified earlier this morning about Officers Maietti, Kang, and the jury all submitting vouchers for the location of, I think it was Grandin Marin, correct? Grandin. Columbus and Marin, right?
I spoke about 2 officers, and then I was shown a third sheet.
Right, and that third sheet was Officer Maietti, and you can take a look at it, and he listed also that he was, the location for that particular voucher indicated Columbus and Marin. Let me just find it for that date, June 2nd, correct? That's S5B, correct? Okay, so you've testified that based upon that master sheet that we looked at, that's a 2-man post, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you recall being questioned by Signorelli and Josward and saying, well, you had already booked in 2 people at that location. Can you give me an explanation for why there would be a 3rd person at that location? Remember that?
No.
Okay.
S5D is being displayed, and that's the activity sheet for the date of June 2nd.
Okay. Now, just looking at the paperwork, okay? Let me just turn this in and see. Just looking at the paperwork, S5B. At any given point, you don't have 2 officers at the location of Columbus and Marin, correct?
Correct.
So, what you have is, at 6:15, according to your testimony based upon the procedure that you followed, at 6:15 you went to the location, again, based upon your paperwork, you went to the location of Columbus and Marin, and you checked in or booked Sergeant Majuri, correct?
Correct.
Now, as I understand your testimony, the other post of Columbus and Marin was in that same vicinity, correct?
Correct.
So, had Police Officer Kang been there, would you have anticipated that you would have been able to see him and book him at that time?
Yes.
Because you testified that your experience was you only go to the post once to check them in, correct?
I don't remember saying that.
Oh, I thought you said on direct that you typically only go one time to the posts.
I go to the post and then I drive around, but in that case, it was a 2-man post, so I had to head back.
You had to head back?
Yes.
Okay. Well, when you went there at 6:15, it's clear that only one officer was present from your paperwork at Columbus and Marin.
That's correct.
All right. And Officer Kang,
Yes.
you booked him in on line 11 at 8 o'clock in the morning, correct?
Yes.
So from 6:15 to 8 o'clock, you have no idea if any other officer came to the location of Columbus and Marion to work that post, correct?
Between those hours, no.
Okay. And when you went back at 8 o'clock and saw Police Officer Kang there, according to your paperwork, based upon your paperwork, we don't even know if Sergeant Majuri was still there, correct?
Based upon the paperwork, no, but
You believe that?
I believe him to be there.
Okay. Now, you didn't testify to this on direct, but what was your practice with regard to when a post was uncovered?
When a post was uncovered, I would call the district job coordinators, I believe, to see if they had somebody covering.
Okay. Direct you to page 15 of your statement. And you were asked about your practice if a post was uncovered when you went there. I asked you just to read it to yourself. Does that refresh your recollection as to what your procedure was when you drove by a post and it appeared to be uncovered?
Yes, that's my recollection of it.
Okay, so you would place a call over the air to the clerk, and specifically you said, depending on the location, the north clerk, to find out if in fact that post was uncovered, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you actually was telling Detective Signorelli and Lieutenant Jostler, you asked them if they had the calls, meaning if they had the recorded calls from that particular day, correct? You see that on page 15, line 16? I don't know if you have the calls.
Line 16 on page, what page?
Page 15, line 16. When you say that, I don't know if you have the calls.
Gotcha.
You're referring to the the recording of the radio transmissions when you would call to the clerk to see if someone was covering a post, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did they indicate to you whether, in fact, they had the calls themselves, the radio calls?
I don't see it in here.
Okay. So you drive by a post, you see that it's uncovered, a post is uncovered, and your practice is you're going to call the clerk to see if, in fact, that's accurate, if someone picked it up earlier in the morning, correct?
At that time, yes.
Okay. And when you do that, you call over the radio, other officers who may be listening in on that channel could hear that a post was uncovered at that point in time, correct?
That's correct.
So if you followed your procedure, and you said you actually you would check on the post itself to see if someone was there, correct?
Yes.
So if you followed your procedure at 6:15, when you saw Sergeant Majuri at that post, Columbus and Marion, and you don't indicate anyone else at that post at that time, if you followed your procedure, you would have called out over the air and said that second post is uncovered, correct?
That's if at that time I didn't know if he was either at the district getting a car. I don't know at that point what it was.
Okay. And you have no independent recollection if someone called you back and said he's on his way, he's doing something?
No, no recollection.
Okay. But it is fair to say that you don't get back to that post until 8 o'clock. So as far as your paperwork is concerned, it shows that Kang wasn't on that post in your visual sight until 8 a.m., correct?
So when I passed 30 a.m. Yep.
All right.
That's correct.
Now let's take a look at Gino Kang's voucher. And you said you thought his name was Jimmy? You see it says Gino on the sheet?
Gotcha.
Are there two different people? Is there a Jimmy Kang and a Gino Kang?
No.
Okay,
Gino.
this is the same person. All right. So we'll go back to S5D in a second. But I just want to look at Officer Kang's voucher. And you see where it says start time?
Yes.
See that 6 where it's got a little hook to the left of it? See that? Do you know when you signed his voucher, did that say 6 a.m. or was there a different number there?
I can't recall.
Okay. when you saw him, if you recall, right there, would you have asked him where he was at 6:13 when you were there at the post?
I would have asked him that.
Okay. And because you could only verify that he was there from 8 o'clock on, correct?
According to the sheet, yes.
All right, but when you signed this voucher, to the best of your recollection, he had put a number in 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., correct?
I just remember that's my signature. I can't recollect what time. The post was from 6 to 10, then that would have been the time on it.
All right. And is it your recollection that when you signed these vouchers that the information at the top was always filled in, or sometimes did you sign it and then it got filled in later?
Filled in.
It was already filled in?
Yes.
Okay. And, okay. So you were comfortable that whatever explanation Officer Ken gave you, that he was there for his 4 hours, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any discussions about, strike that. So now, you also said in your statement, and I'll see if you recall it before I show it to you, that when you had a post that was uncovered and you determined it was uncovered, you noted it on your patrol log, correct?
Yes.
Now let's put this back up again. So you went from Columbus and Marion at 6:15, then you took you approximately 5 minutes to get to Officer Scarpa, who was at, looks like Grand and Washington. Thank you, Judge. And then you went and drove by, at 6:30, you went to Grand and Marion, and you listed that as an uncovered post, correct?
That's correct.
And that's your practice as you testified to today, correct?
Yes.
Now, at some point you got to Grand and Jersey, right? Because the line number 5 at 6:50, you said P.O. Sealski, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was at Grand and Jersey, correct?
That's what I wrote in that sheet, yes.
Wrote that in. Okay. And Grand and Jersey, according to S5U, is Skyway 33, correct?
Grand and Jersey, yes.
Okay. And there's no one listed in that spot. So when you took that snapshot of S5U, you wouldn't have known really that anybody was there. But when you showed up, there was Officer Sealski, according to your paperwork, correct?
Yes.
All right. What did you note, if anything, as to Skyway 34, which is a secondary post at Grand and Jersey?
Looks like I didn't write uncovered on it.
Okay. Based upon your paperwork, we can't tell if that was uncovered or not, correct?
That's correct.
There could have been an officer standing there, for all we know, and you just didn't book him in, correct?
Possibility.
Okay. But it's fair to say that your paperwork being spot on with regard to the uncovered post of Grand and Marion, you listed as uncovered, but with regard to Grand and Jersey, you didn't list that as uncovered, correct?
That's correct.
But you were clearly there, according to the paperwork.
I was clearly there at time I wrote on the sheet.
Which is 6:50 a.m., correct? And you only saw Sealski there, correct?
That's correct.
So if you had followed your practice and no one was there, you would have listed 6:50 a.m. Officer, you would have put uncovered post, and you would have put Grand and Jersey on it. So you could have accounted for every one of the posts, right?
Yes, or slashed uncovered.
Right, slash uncovered.
Where he is listed.
I got you. So that's not really consistent with your normal policy, right? Not putting uncovered for that post.
We would place uncovered on the paper.
Right, and we don't see that for that particular.
No, we do not.
Okay, that's fair. Listen, you're doing a lot of stuff out there, right? There's traffic going on. You're trying to make sure that that the traffic is moving at different locations. You're probably on the radio trying to call to see if these posts are covered. Somewhat of a hectic situation, correct?
It is traffic, yeah.
June 2nd, 2014. That's school's still in session, correct?
I believe. Yes.
And this area is the downtown Jersey City area where there's multiple schools and a lot of traffic, right?
Yes.
And fair to say you from time to time would make a mistake, correct?
I believe on that paperwork I did make a mistake.
You did. All right, and you testified on direct that what your obligation was to make sure it was accurate, correct?
Yes.
But we can't always make sure everything's accurate. We do our best, but we can't, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, so then you were asked on direct examination about the post listed as Grand and Pacific, correct?
And Pacific. Yes.
All right. So just before I get into that, so we're clear, the two-man post of Columbus and Marin, based upon this paperwork, doesn't indicate at all, strike that, doesn't indicate that two people were standing on that post at a given time. We established that, correct?
According to the paperwork.
Okay. So that third post, whether it be Maietti or Kang, that could, at 8 o'clock, there could have been still two people standing on that post, correct?
It would have been the same people on this list.
All right, why do you say that?
Because someone would have to get paid if there was another one there. If they responded to go there, they would have to get paid.
Okay. I agree. They would have to get paid. So if someone was there for a period of time before Kang got there with Majuri and had their voucher signed by another officer, they would be there, correct?
He wasn't there at the time I went there.
Okay, that's fair enough. And all we know is you went there at 6:15 a.m. the first time, correct?
That's correct. And
Okay.
the second time.
And do you recall giving an explanation as to why there was the possibility that 3 people could have been on a 2-person post? You remember that when you were being questioned?
No.
All right. I'm going to direct your attention to page 19. Did you ever run into an issue where you had 3 individuals on a 2-man post and had to relocate them? You see where that is at the top?
Yes.
All right. So they asked you, was it a common occurrence, you know, and you answered maybe some different names, that one would maybe change or something, but I don't recall. That was the answer that you gave, right?
Right.
And then Signorelli asked you, because this is a little bit of, it seems to me from going through all this paperwork, and let me just stop for a second. Did he indicate what paperwork he was going through?
I don't recall.
Okay. This is kind of a unique issue when you have 2-man posts, both posts are full, and then you have somebody else putting in for the same post. Did that ever happen where you have 3 people on a post? Remember seeing that question being posed to you? According to this. You're reading. All right, your answer was, and I just want you to see if you can explain this to me. Your answer was, could they have covered a post but not through me? Maybe they covered the post and went over the air and said they're covering this post because I passed already and it wasn't covered. You know what I'm saying. Did you give that answer?
According to this, yes.
All right, so if I understand that correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that someone could have heard over the air that the post wasn't covered when you went there at 6:15 a.m. and took it upon themselves to cover that post, correct?
According to this, yes.
Because you say, because I passed there already and it wasn't covered. You're referring to Columbus and Marin, correct?
That's correct.
So someone could have heard you say that, send somebody out there, because that's a pretty busy intersection, right? Columbus and Marin?
It's busy.
Columbus and Marin is the one that when you're coming down Columbus, which is a main artery that goes to the east in Jersey City, many vehicles try to make that left-hand turn onto Marin to get to the Holland Tunnel, correct?
That's correct.
And are you familiar with whether there were cones that were set up at that location?
Don't recall.
Don't recall. Okay. So, do you recall when you got there at 10 o'clock if there were any cones? When you got there, when you went back there to punch Kang's ticket there, did you see any cones if you recall?
8 o'clock, I don't recall.
8 o'clock,
Don't say
sorry.
at any time. No.
Okay. So when you say here that they could have covered a post but not through me, what are you referring to?
It could have been reassigned, such as Sealski was reassigned, but I wasn't notified.
You weren't notified. Okay. So you really don't have an explanation as to why 3 officers may have the same post listed on their voucher, correct?
No.
And just to finish up with S5D, the prosecutor asked you about Torres. You put on your voucher that there were there was two people at Grand and Pacific, correct?
That's,
That would be Torres and Baker.
yes,
All right. So again, everything you're testifying to is based upon a paperwork, right?
yes,
So you went to Grand and Pacific at 7:10, and you booked Torres in according to your paperwork, correct?
that's correct.
But his voucher lists Grand and Center, correct?
I don't have that voucher in front of me.
Who's that?
That would be Torres. That would be.
That's 5J.
I'm sorry.
That's 5J.
Thank you, Judge. That's the yellow. Okay. So Torres lists Grand and Center as the post that he was at, correct?
That's correct.
Now he could have been standing at Grand and Pacific for whatever reason when you went there, because that's what you wrote on your patrol log.
I believe he was standing at this location.
Okay.
According to what I signed there, he had to be at that spot.
You had to be at this spot.
Yep.
And that maybe when you transposed your notes from your scrap paper to your log, you just put the wrong location
I
there?
believe that's what's happening.
You believe that. And why don't you trust your log?
I trust my log, but there's been shown where there's been an error on 2 occasions on that particular activity sheet.
On that day, but that particular
Yep.
day, June 2nd, there's been at least 2 errors that we've been able to find.
That we've, discovered, yep.
All right, so based upon that, you believe that your log is not the accurate one and the voucher is the accurate one, correct?
I believe it's accurate. I believe there were 2 inaccuracies in it.
Okay, fair enough. I got you. Okay. Now, either on this particular date or other dates that you worked as supervisor, do you ever recall a time where you relocated an individual from the post that they were assigned to another post?
I don't recall.
You were, in continuing that answer that you gave on page 19, and you were talking about that you passed it and it wasn't covered, you say, like he put Columbus and Marin, the calls for 2 and 3 there. If he was there, I would have put him on that sheet. And then Detective Signorelli asked you, right, or you would have reassigned him to Grand and Marin, which was an uncovered post, correct? That's the one we looked at in line 3.
Gotcha.
And your answer was, it would, yes. It would have been the thing to do, but it didn't arise at that time, correct?
I
So-
guess according to this, that's what.
So if you had an extra person at a post, and you had an uncovered post, it would be your practice to relocate that individual, according to this answer, to that spot.
According to that answer.
Okay. So let me show you D66 for identification. I ask you just to take a look at this document. It's 2 pages. And it's for the date of 6/24/14, June 24th of 2014. You see a voucher there for an officer by the name of Stephen Taddeo.
Yes.
Okay, and he's got the start time at 6 o'clock, end time at 10 o'clock, and it's located at, his location is Junction, Grand, and Communipore. You see that?
Junction, Grand and Community. Yep.
Okay, and is that your signature as the foreman authorized agent on that?
Yes.
Now, the second page of this document appears to be your patrol log, and you correct me if I'm wrong, for that particular date, covering those posts, including Grand and Communipore.
Yes.
Correct? And you see in slot number 4 at 7:10, you had P.O. Taddeo at Grand and Communipore, correct?
Yep.
And you had 2 other officers actually there as well, so that's a 3-man post if you recall.
I don't recall.
You don't recall. But you had 3 individuals there at that time, correct?
That's recorded. Yep.
Okay. So now, on the bottom in your notes, you have P.O. Taddeo moved to 1 and 9 in Communipore, correct? You actually noted that in any additional activity on the bottom.
Okay. Yes.
Okay? So on that particular occasion, if you're, I'm sure you have no recollection of 6/24/14, correct? But you noted P.O. Taddeo moving to 1 and 9 in Communipore, correct?
According to that, yes.
Okay. Do you recall, strike that, would you have required P.O. Taddeo to put a second post on his voucher if you moved him from the junction, Grand and Communipaw, to 1 and 9 at Communipaw?
Have him do what?
Put a second post on his voucher.
No, I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So the fact that he got moved to a different post, as long as he indicated one of the posts he was at some point during that 4-hour tour, you were okay with that?
Yes.
You said that the common practice was that when you checked them in, you would then make a note on the master that you had, and then later transpose that or transcribe that onto the activity sheet of the patrol log, correct?
Yes.
First voucher is for Desiree Brody, correct? At start time of 3 to 7 p.m. That would be the afternoon shift of the Skyway detail on June 9th of 2014, correct?
Yes.
And that's your signature and locates Desiree Brody at the junction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want you to skip to the 3rd page. There's a police officer, Bridget Ravel's voucher from 3 to 7 on that particular date for the junction. Appears to be signed by a Sergeant Evangelista, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the one after that is a police officer, Tui, same location, same date, same time, Sergeant Evangelista, correct?
Yes.
And then there's a Christopher, I'm going to butcher this name, but it looks like Kozik. Same time, same date, same location, Communipaw and Grand, which is the junction, correct?
Yes.
Signed by Sergeant Evangelista. So there's 4 individuals for the 3 to 7 p.m. shift at that post, which is the junction, correct?
According to this, yes.
Okay. And if you look at the last page, the last 2 pages, this is that master list that you referred to earlier for that date. Corresponds June 9th of 2014, correct?
What page are you on?
We're looking at the last page of it. That's the West District that has Communipaw and...
Okay.
Okay. So you see on Skyways 49, 50, and 51 is the junction, correct?
49, 50, 51. Yes.
So that's a 3-person post. I keep saying man, I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's a 3-person post, correct?
That's correct.
And when, for the afternoon, when Sergeant Evangelista is listed as the supervisor, Tui, Kozik, and they have Miller listed there. I strike that. And we have Ravel, the 3 officers we just referred to from that 3 to 7 shift, correct?
The officers you went over before?
Yeah.
Tui, Ravel, Kozik. Yes.
Okay. So they're correctly listed as working on that particular day, and we have a corresponding voucher for that location from 3 to 7, correct?
Yes.
But we also have Desiree Brody for that location for 3 to 7 on June 9th, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you signed that voucher,
Yes.
do you recall where Desiree Brody was?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I have
And
to go off the paper.
the second page, just so we're fair, second page is your voucher, your
Yes.
patrol log, excuse me, correct?
Yes.
And you have listed in slot number 3, Detective Brody at Communipaw and Grand in the morning shift,
Yes.
right? You were working that morning shift, you did the patrol log, and you booked in Detective Brody, correct?
That's correct.
But according to this paperwork, 4 people got paid for a 3-man post at the same time, 3 to 7, correct?
According to the paperwork, yes.
All right. So which do you think is accurate? Detective Desiree Brody's voucher or your patrol log?
My patrol log.
Your patrol log, okay. And so if I understand the way the vouchers are filled out, Desiree Brody would have been standing on her post at 6 o'clock in the morning and written down 3 to 7?
I can't explain the time inaccuracy on there, but
Okay.
I know she had to be on that corner at 6:30 on that date.
Okay. And when you looked at the voucher, did you always make note of the location and the time that they indicate on the voucher?
Yes.
All right. And when you're signing this, are you attesting to the information that's listed on the voucher?
Yes.
Okay. So you're attesting that Desiree Brody was there from 3 to 7?
That she was there at 6:30, so 6 to 10.
Okay. And I should have asked you that question with regard to the voucher that we looked at before with Police Officer Stephen Taddeo when you moved him. Were you attesting to the fact that he was at that specific location of Communipaw? I forget the location, but that he was there at that particular time?
Yes, he was.
Even though he moved?
He moved after that time.
Right. You didn't indicate on your patrol log when he moved, though.
It's just, I know it had to happen that way.
You know it had to happen that way?
Because I wouldn't be able to speak to him unless I was at the location to move him.
Okay. But you don't know if you saw him at the secondary location or at the first location?
I would have to meet him at the location he was supposed to be at.
You couldn't, you don't recall, you definitely know you didn't radio that information out?
I have no recollection of any of that stuff.
Okay, let's look at D68, we'll put 66 away for a moment. Okay, so the first document there, let's take a look at the first document. That's a voucher for Francisco Montero from the hours of 6 to 10 at a location Communipaw in Monticello, and it's signed by you. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
And according to the master, which is third and fourth page of that exhibit, you are listed as the supervisor in the West District, the last page.
Yes.
Correct? And Communipaw and Monticello would have been one of the posts that you were required to check on to see if officers were working, correct?
Yes.
And for that particular post, Skyway 48, Montero's name is listed as working that day, correct?
Yes.
Now, when we look at your log, Montero's not on there anywhere, is he?
That's correct, he's not.
Okay. Now, did you even go to Communipaw and Monticello based upon this paperwork?
Based upon the paperwork, I know that if I signed this sheet, I signed this sheet at the location where I went.
Okay, that's your practice, right?
That's it.
But he's not on your log.
He's not.
How can you explain that for me, if you can?
When I transferred from the one sheet, I must have missed it on the sheet.
Okay, so in this instance, the voucher is more accurate than the patrol log, right?
In this instance, this location is the thing that reigns. If my signature's on there and it has a time, I know he was there at that time.
Okay, and what time would that have been?
That I don't have noted because I didn't cross-reference it to the sheet.
All right, so the couple of examples we looked at, sometimes it's the patrol log that's more accurate, and sometimes it's the voucher that's more accurate, correct? Is that fair to say?
Well, they get paid over this.
Right, they get paid off of the voucher.
Yes.
Correct, okay. And you're responsible for that particular day, you would have been responsible for 13 posts, correct? You look at the last page, right?
Yes, 13.
Okay, and some of them are listed as blank on the master, correct?
Yes.
Now, did you go to do you recall, based upon your practice, did you go to the locations which were blank to see if they got filled?
I'm sure I went past these locations.
All right, and you normally would have listed them as uncovered on your patrol log, correct?
That's correct.
All right, where in this patrol log did you list those posts that were, because you only went to 9 posts, correct?
No, I had officers at 9 posts.
You had officers at 9 posts, that's
That I
right.
recorded.
Right, so there's 4 other posts that you would have been responsible for that you
Well, we know
are not on the patrol log, correct?
Yeah, we know 3 should have been uncovered, and then this officer should have been on it.
All right, so you answered my question. So 3 of them should have been uncovered. You should have
Yep.
listed them as uncovered. And the other one should have listed Montero.
Yes, Montero.
Based upon the information that you would have received with respect to your supervision of the West District on that day, who would you have expected to see at Communipaw Monticello Skyway 48?
41's uncovered.
48, I'm sorry.
48, Montero.
Okay. Do you know Montero?
I believe he worked in the West.
Okay.
I believe he was evenings in the West.
Okay, was?
I'm trying to,
All right.
yeah, West.
Okay. And now you didn't, so you would have expected to see him there at Communipaw Monticello? According to the...
Montero, Communipaw, Monticello, yes.
Okay, and according to the pay voucher that you signed for Montero, did you engage with Montero on that day?
Yes.
And where did you, according to the pay voucher that you signed, where did you engage with Montero that day?
Communipaw, Monticello.
So according to the roster sheet, you would have expected to see Montero there.
Yes.
And then according to your pay voucher, you were the supervisor listed that day and you did see Montero.
According to you, but I signed
According to
it.
the
Yes.
pay, right, you signed. And it's sort of the same questions for Tadeo. This is the same date, 6/24, so you're gonna have to cross-reference the roster sheet for, that's attached to D68 with the pay voucher that's attached to, or that is identified as D66. So according to the roster sheet, you would have seen Tadeo, you would have expected to see who at Communipaw and Grant? One of how many officers?
We're speaking about Taddeo.
Yeah, where would you have expected to see Tadeo on that morning?
On the pay, Communipaw and Grand
Okay.
Junction.
And now, according to the pay voucher that you signed, where you, I think you testified to this pretty clearly on cross-examination. When you engage with Tadeo, at least initially, where did you engage him?
At Grand and Communipaw.
Okay, and that's where you would have expected to see Stephen Tadeo.
Taddeo, yeah.
And so then you were questioned about the notes on the second page of D66. You actually have any additional activity, and you wrote P.O. Tadeo moved to 1 and 9 in Communipaw. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. You don't have any independent recollection of doing that as you sit here today?
No,
But that is your handwriting?
that's it.
And was it your practice if there was something out of something worth noting that you noted it?
Yes,
So you actually noted it here on the...
that one, yes.
And initially you booked him in at Communipaw and Grand.
Yes,
Right. And then you, at some point, based upon your paperwork anyway, you moved him.
yes.
And if you could just refer to S5D, that's your patrol voucher for the June 2nd date. Oh, I'm sorry.
5D is on the,
You have S5D, Your Honor, is that correct?
I did.
Thanks.
Did you make any notes about Officer Maiani on what's been placed with evidence as S5D?
No, I didn't.
Do you have any recollection of ever having any interaction with Officer Maiani on any DOT detail?
I don't recall.
You don't recall? So you have no recollection?
No recollection.
And as far as the timing on Officer Kang, you got there at 6:15, right?
Yes,
I think you testified on direct and or on cross that when you got there, if you would have seen him there at 6:15, you would have booked him. Is that correct?
yes.
You know, could he have arrived at 6:16?
I don't know.
You don't know, right?
No, I don't.
You just know that, at least based upon this paperwork, you didn't see him there because you would have booked him in there.
Yes.
Do you know what time he arrived on that post?
No, I don't.
You do know that he did arrive on that post, is that correct?
Yes,
And how did you know that he arrived on that post?
because I saw him there at 8 o'clock.
Okay, and you were also asked about why you wouldn't have marked that as uncovered at 6:15, okay? And I want to direct your attention to S5U, I believe. It's the roster sheet for that day up there.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, UMV, I think it is. It's this roster sheet. Master list, roster sheet.
Do you have S5?
I don't see that one. That's fine, yep, got it. Okay,
At least according to the master roster sheet.
Master roster sheet.
According to the master roster sheet. Who did you expect to see at Columbus and Mentor?
Majority and Kang.
And who ultimately did you see at Columbus and Mentor?
Majority and Kang.
According to your roster, according to your patrol sheet, did you ever see my Eddie there?
No,
And there are no notes with respect to anything noteworthy on June 2nd, is that correct?
correct.
And you were asked on cross-examination about whether somebody could possibly have heard something on the radio and then went and filled in a post, took it upon themselves to go fill a post?
That's good.
All right. Are you familiar with what an officer would actually have to do to properly obtain a post?
I don't know the exact procedures. I know they go to job picks, but
Okay, what about picking up at the last minute?
it could happen.
Okay, it could happen, right?
Yeah.
Did you have to sign up for it at the district?
At some point, it was instituted signing in the district. I don't know if it was at the same time that this date.
But as far as your paperwork goes, we never saw my Eddie.
I didn't see.
And then with respect to D67, it's June 9th date. You were listed as working the morning shift that day? Is that based upon the last two pages of what's been marked as D67, the roster sheet? Actually, it's the last page.
Yes,
And that was the West District,
that's correct.
according to the West District on the roster sheet.
Yes, on the roster sheet.
And according to that morning, who would you have expected? Would you have expected to see Officer Brody, Desiree Brody, at the junction?
Yes.
Unicorn Junction? Okay. And according to the pay voucher that you signed, where did you engage with Officer Brody that morning?
At the junction.
Okay. And in fact, according to your patrol sheet, you have Officer Brody on your patrol sheet for Commute Point and Grant, is that correct?
Yes,
And that's the junction, right?
yes.
If you get to take a look at S5U, do you see Captain Aspley's listed as a supervisor anywhere on S5U?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for just reading.
Judge Odes for some latitude in terms of rehabilitating the witness with respect to the process?
What was your objection based on?
The document speaks for itself. It's reading. Just,
Well,
I don't think we can rehabilitate the witness by reading.
Judge, there was multiple questions I asked with respect to the process and the paperwork and the accuracy of the paperwork. I'm just asking him whether at anywhere. I understand Your Honor can read it, but I'm asking this witness if he saw, if anywhere on this paper he sees Captain Aspley's listed as a supervisor that day.
I'll overrule the objection.
Is he listed as a supervisor that day?
I don't see it.
No. Are you listed as a supervisor that day?
Yes.
Captain Heskley signed any of the other pay vouchers that have been marked? Well, strike that. You know what, Judge, I don't need him to read that. Those pay vouchers will speak for themselves. I have no further questions.
One question. You just testified that it's possible that Officer Kang showed up at 6:14 and then you booked him in at 8 o'clock in the morning, correct?
It's a probability, yes. It could have happened. I know at the time that I wrote on the lit sheet, that's what time I saw him there.
And you have nothing in your paperwork or your recollection to indicate if Officer Maetti showed up at 6:14 and left at 7:59 when Officer Kang showed up, correct?
I don't have anything documented other than what I wrote down.
Thank you.